If you found a diary predicting your life, would you follow its guidance or fight against it? Ethan sat before his flickering laptop screen, dim light painting tired lines beneath his scruffy hair and glinting off the rims of his glasses. The glow struggled against the evening shadow pooling in the small study of his grandfather's century-old home, a space he had barely begun to call his own. Outside, the wind shifted uneasily, tugging at the loose window frames and setting the creaking floors to a slow, ominous rhythm. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, reluctant to move, yet desperate for some declaration of worth. Then, a sharp notification cut through the silence, the relentless rejection email from the online publication he'd poured his soul into. Its harsh simplicity, "Thank you for your submission. We regret to inform you," fell like heavy stones, thudding against the fragile walls of his hope. He leaned back, the squeak of the old desk chair breaking the thick, suffocating quiet. Sweat dampened his worn sweater as doubt tightened its grip. The room, rich with the scent of aged wood and musty ink from forgotten books, now felt like a cage closing in. Not good enough, the phrase echoed in his mind, whispered by voices unseen but brutally familiar. His eyes flicked to the faded photographs lining the bookshelf, yellowed family portraits with faces half-forgotten, lives whispered away by time. They seemed to watch him, silent judges of his failure. Hands clenched into fists, he pressed fingers against his temples, fighting the rising tide of self-reproach. The lingering smell of old paper and the faint creak beneath his feet reminded him of his grandfather's stories, the hidden truths buried beneath layers of history. Yet tonight, those stories felt distant, irrelevant against the crushing weight of insignificance. The cool air from the cracked window brushed uneasy tendrils against his skin, stirring loose papers scattered across the desk like shattered fragments of his dreams. The flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows, distortions that seemed to mimic the turmoil within. In a swift, frustrated motion, he shut the laptop, plunging the room into near darkness save for the erratic sputter of the dying candle. The silence that followed was not peace but a void, a space echoing the absence of validation, of purpose. His breath came shallow and quick, chest tight as he wrestled with the gnawing belief that perhaps the stories waiting within him were destined to remain untold. The creak of the floorboards underfoot punctuated the cold stillness, a reminder of instability lurking beneath the surface. A deep exhale spilled through cracked lips, mingling with the fading warmth of the candle's glow. The night pressed in, heavy and implacable, as Ethan's gaze drifted back to the flickering screen, now black and empty, yet somehow still reflecting his own fragmented reflection, unsettled and searching. The room seemed to hold its breath, suspended in a moment thick with despair and tiny, unspoken possibilities, a fragile pause before the uncertain journey ahead. The dim glow of the living room lamp cast long, wavering shadows across the crumpled papers strewn over Ethan's cluttered desk. His eyes were fixed on a blank screen that mirrored back fragments of his own doubt, an empty cursor blinking relentlessly, a silent reminder of his stalled ambitions. The weight of rejection settled heavily in his chest, a dense fog muffling every trace of confidence he once nurtured. He leaned back, the worn-out fabric of his sweater biting into his skin as he ran a tired hand through his scruffy hair. The creaking floorboards beneath his feet echoed loudly in the quiet, each groan a stark punctuation to the silence that enveloped the house. Faint light filtered through the slightly cracked window, painting the room in muted grays and blues, a melancholic palette befitting the turbulence inside. Memories of past successes, fleeting and fragile, bobbed unbidden to the surface, words once praised now drowned amid the chorus of dismissals. The email rejections piled up like unread letters, each one another layer of invisibility wrapped around his passion. "Not what we're looking for, does not meet our standards," phrases etched into the fabric of his self-doubt. His breath hitched, lips pressed firm as a wave of frustration and helplessness churned beneath the surface. Yet in the depths of his despair, a spark flickered, a defiant ember resisting the suffocating night. Ethan's fingers twitched toward the neglected notebook beside him, its pages blank but potent with possibility. The scent of old paper and faint traces of mold mingled with the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee cooling forgotten on the nearby table. Beyond the window, the suburbs lay muted, streets slick with rain, the hum of distant traffic a far-off lullaby. The air seemed charged with unspoken anticipation, as though the house itself waited for a shift of fracture in the unrelenting monotony. Ethan's jaw clenched tightly, resolving to wrestle with the fears that threatened to engulf him. The unspoken questions echoed. Was he merely a ghost of potential unrealized? Could the shadows of past failures be lifted to reveal a spark yet to ignite? He stood abruptly, the chair scraping harshly against the floor, and paced the room, eyes darting to fading photographs lining the mantelpiece. Face ancestors weathered by time, their gazes solemn, as if urging him onward, watched silently, their own histories entwined with his present struggle. In a moment of quiet rebellion, Ethan grabbed the sleeve of his sweater, twisting it into a grip as though gathering invisible threads of strength. His voice, barely above a whisper, trembled but carried resolve. Not yet. His gaze lingered on the darkened hallway leading to the attic, a place he had yet to explore fully, a repository of family secrets and old stories, creaking floors and dust-veiled memories. The unknown beckoned with a strange allure, promising answers or perhaps more questions. The room held its breath as Ethan's eyes narrowed, a flicker of determination igniting amidst the shadows of rejection and self-doubt. The flickering light of the lamp danced across his face, revealing the first traces of a man hesitant but unwilling to surrender. The camera pulled back slowly, framing a solitary figure standing amid the quiet battleground of dreams deferred, poised at the edge of discovery. A creak echoed from above, soft, inviting, and the scene held, suspended between darkness and the faint possibility of change. Ethan stepped outside the quiet hum of his dimly lit study, the cool air of the evening washing over him like a tentative embrace. The sun was a waning silver orb behind the gray autumn clouds, casting muted shadows over the well-worn porch of his grandfather's house, a relic of fading time, creaking and whispering secrets with every subtle wind. He walked slowly across the aged wooden floorboards of the porch, their groans a rhythmic echo like a heartbeat of the home itself, alive beneath his feet. Each step stirred a faint sympathy and old, the scent of stories long buried beneath forgotten dust. Ethan's gaze drifted downward where lines of cracked floorboards met the threshold inside. Impulsively, he knelt, brushing his fingers against a loosened plank near the edge. The wood was rough, splintering beneath his touch, but as he pried gently, a thin sliver of darkness peeked from beneath, an invitation to uncover what had been concealed. With careful hands, he lifted the floorboard, revealing a small, dust-laden compartment. Nestled inside was an ancient, leather-bound diary, its surface worn and mottled with age, the spine cracked but resilient. The faint scent of old paper and ink swirled from the pages, filling the air with a nostalgic hush that seemed to pulse with quiet power. Ethan drew the diary out slowly, cradling it as if it were a fragile relic from another world. His breath caught a strange mixture of curiosity and foreboding knitting tension beneath his skin. The diary, a silent witness to generations past, seemed to thrum with the weight of hidden truths. The fading light filtered through the open window, casting fractured beams that slipped softly over the diary's cover. Shadows from the ornate carvings merged with the waning daylight, as if the past and present were intertwined in an eternal dance. Ethan's fingers trembled as he opened the diary, inked words flickering beneath his Gaussian uncanny mirror reflecting his own fragmented fears and hopes. A distant floorboard creaked above in the attic. The sound seeped into the room like a whispered secret. The house itself seemed to awaken around him, its restless breathing echoing the beat of his own conflicted heart. As he flipped through the yellowed pages, descriptions of dreams, fears, and life unfold a narrative that eerily echoed the trials Ethan wrestled within himself. The diary's predictions, simple yet chilling, began to crystallize, a mysterious linkage unfolding between the written word and the rhythms of his own existence. A surge of unspoken determination stirred within him, shattering the heavy silence that had weighed on his soul. The diary was no longer merely a relic of the past but a map to understanding, a compass promising clarity amid the fog of uncertainty. With one last glance at the dimming dusk beyond the window, Ethan closed the diary gently, the leather sighing softly in his hands. The house creaked again, as if acknowledging the opening of a new chapter, one where destiny and choice were poised in delicate balance. The camera pulled back, framing Ethan silhouetted against the warm flicker of an old lamp, the diary clasped tightly, a symbol of hidden histories now alive with possibility. Within the ancient walls, a story waiting to be written, a life waiting to be claimed. The scene faded into twilight, the quiet crackling of the fireplace mingling with the soft chorus of the creaking house, an overture to the mysteries soon to unravel. Night had fallen like a thick velvet curtain over the old house, the only illumination coming from a solitary, flickering candle on Ethan's cluttered writing desk. His glasses caught the soft light, reflecting shadows that danced upon the walls stained with the passage of time. The diary lay open in front of him, its ink-stained pages whispering stories both familiar and unsettling, like echoes of a life carefully hidden beneath dust and forgotten years. The soft sound of creaking floors resonated through the house, the wooden beams settling, as restless as Ethan's own unsettled thoughts. Outside, a chill wind stirred the ancient oaks that lined the suburban street, their skeletal branches scratching against the glass, a ghostly percussion to the storm swirling inside him. Ethan's fingers traced the fragile handwriting on the diary's page, a chilling prophecy that mirrored a recent encounter he'd had, the details eerily precise. His breath caught, the line between his reality and the diary's predictions blurring in the candlelight. Doubt gnawed at him, a relentless companion beside the simmering flame of his curiosity. "This can't be coincidence," he whispered, voice barely breaking the silence. A storm rumbled in the distance, a low growl that vibrated through the floorboards and settled in his chest. His eyes darted to the faded photographs lining the mantelpiece, ghosts of family blurred by time, faces that seemed to watch, judging, waiting. The house itself felt alive, an ancient entity breathing secrets through its creaking limbs. Determined, Ethan closed the diary with a decisive snap, the sound sharp against the whispering wind. He stood, the frayed fabric of his sweater stretched across his shoulders like a worn armor. Each step toward the stairway was deliberate, his mind racing with possibilities and fears alike. On the landing, he paused, the house settling again beneath him. The soft groan of wood beneath his feet was a reminder that the foundation beneath his life was as precarious as the fragmented pages before him. Outside, rain began to fall in soft patters, tapping insistently against the windowpane, rhythms syncing with the erratic beating of his heart. The muted colors of the night seeped inside, painting the walls with strokes of navy and gray. But within Ethan, something flickered, fragile embers of courage, a yearning to seize control over a fate seemingly written in the faded ink of that diary. He reached the attic door, the cold metal knob chilled beneath his touch. The shadows beyond beckoned, filled with whispered mysteries and dangers unsaid. Ethan's lips pressed into a thin line as he pushed open the door, the creak an eerie welcome into the depths of his family's concealed truths. The attic was shrouded in darkness, dust motes swirling in the flickering candlelight he carried. Old trunks loomed like silent sentinels, and the smell of aged paper and forgotten lives hung heavy. He bent to examine the floorboards, fingers tracing the grain, searching, hoping to unearth more answers hidden beneath layers of history. As the candle flame wavered, a faint scuffling stirred from the shadows, soft, elusive, as if the house itself breathed secrets and beckoned him forward. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. A shiver coursed through him, equal parts fear and determination. "What are you trying to tell me?" he muttered, voice thick with emotion. The attic held its silence, the answers tangled within the brittle pages and creaking beams. The camera lingered on Ethan's face, illuminated by resolve and shadow, poised on the brink of a journey that would test his mind, his heart, and his very grasp of reality. The storm outside swelled, rain beating against the roof like the relentless pulse of destiny. The scene faded into darkness, leaving the viewer suspended in the fragile tension between past and future, memory and truth, fear and hope. Ethan's days began to unravel beneath the oppressive weight of the diary's grip, each page turning into a whispered prophecy guiding his every move. The house, steeped in history with its worn plank floors and peeling wallpaper, became both sanctuary and prison, a ghostly stage where his internal battle played out under the watchful eyes of faded portraits. Those fading photographs, once mere decoration, now seemed to ripple with secret knowledge, their blurred faces watching his every falter. Morning light filtered hesitantly through heavy curtains, mingling with dust motes that clung stubbornly to stale air. Ethan lay awake, heart pounding not from dreams but from dread fed by the diary's chilling foresights. He sat up slowly, the creak of the floor beneath him echoing like a sinister echo in the stillness. Every movement felt measured and prescribed, as though his own will was slipping underwater, tethered to the diary's cryptic commands. His interaction with those around him began to fray. At a coffee shop, the warm clink of cups and murmur of conversations became a distant buzz. When his editor called, their words once encouraging now saw him as unreliable. "Ethan, you're distracted. Deadlines matter." He forced a weak smile. "I'm fine. Just juggling a lot right now." The lie felt brittle. At home, the strain crept closer. His mother, visiting unexpectedly, sensed the change. Her eyes, mirroring concern and confusion, pierced through his veneer. "Ethan, you're not yourself. What's going on?" He shook his head, retreating deeper into silence. "I'm just tired, Mom." The diary sat ominously on the kitchen table, its leather cover like a talisman of fate. Ethan glanced at it, heart lurching with simultaneous reverence and revulsion. Each entry gnawed at him, some eerily specific, others murky and unsettling. He began cross-referencing his own routines with the diary's predictions, altering his actions, not fully trusting his own instincts anymore. One evening, amidst the flickering shadows cast by the fireplace, Ethan paused before an old mirror. His reflection a man frayed and worn stared back blankly. "Who are you becoming?" he whispered, voice cracking with a rare tremor of vulnerability. Darkness pressed closer, and a sudden, sharp knock at the door jolted him from his contemplation. Outside stood his mother, concern etched deep into her features. "Ethan, please don't shut me out." He opened the door cautiously, the cold night air rushing in like a breath of harsh reality. They spoke, fractured words bridging a widening gap. "I don't know what's happening," he admitted. "But this diary, it's changing everything." His mother's eyes softened, a silent offering of support amidst uncertainty. "We face our demons, son, sometimes in places we fear the most. But you're not alone." Ethan's resolve darkened. The diary was not merely a relic but a commandment. His life, a life once driven by passion, was now a precarious line between obedience and rebellion. As the night deepened, Ethan returned to the attic, the diary cradled like a forbidden scripture. The floor beneath him moaned with ancient protest, the air thick with the scent of mildew and forgotten time. The lines between past and present blurred as the diary whispered yet another chilling prediction about an impending confrontation one he dreaded yet felt inexorably drawn toward. He closed the diary with a sharp snap, the echo ricocheting through the attic's hollow vault. Heart racing, breath shallow, Ethan stared into the fading candlelight, the fragile flame dancing like a beacon amid the darkness. The camera captured his face etched with doubt, fear, but flickering with the first stubborn sparks of defiance. The diary might dictate the pages, but the story was far from written. Outside, the wind rose, rattling the windows and weaving a haunting melody that entwined with the creaking house and Ethan's uneasy heartbeat. The scene faded to black, a breath held between the diary's shadows and the uncertain dawn of choice. The weight of the diary in Ethan's hands was heavier than mere leather and paper. It was a burden of secrets, a gravestone for the truths buried long before his time. The attic's shadows seemed to lean in closer, the fading light casting narrow beams across the worn floorboards stained with years of forgotten footsteps. A chill traced the nape of his neck as he slowly turned each brittle page, the inked words revealing fragments of a life at once hauntingly familiar and devastatingly alien. The narrative twisted through generations, peeling back layers of family lore and deception. Ethan's breath faltered when he stumbled upon a passage describing a forbidden liaison, a betrayal redolent with echoes of silence and denial. Names blurred and faded photographs, like ghosts, rose from the margins of the diary, their presence a spectral accusation. His eyes locked on a faded portrait-on image of his grandfather alongside a stern gentleman whose face was unfamiliar, yet his aura was undeniable, a hidden root beneath the family tree's sturdy trunk. The diary whispered a lineage rewritten. The past was no longer a stable foundation but a precarious ledger of half-truths and concealed sins. A sharp creak above interrupted his reverie, the attic floor groaning under unseen pressure. Ethan's heart beat wild, part fear, part adrenaline as the atmosphere thickened with a sense of impending reckoning. He pulled the diary closer, the leather cover cold and unforgiving. "It's all connected," he murmured, voice tight with disbelief. "Every story, every shadow." He rose, restless, pacing amid the scattered relics, his mind wrestling with the revelation that what he had known was but a fraction of the reality stitching together his identity like a fragile seam. The fabric of his beliefs was unraveling, thread by aching thread. Ethan thought of the creaking floors throughout the house, the subtle protests of a building weighed down by history's secrets. Those groans were no longer mere sounds, but echoes of a legacy demanding to be confronted, a legacy entwined with his own fractured self. The diary's predictions fluttered in his thoughts, not as prescient guides but as harbingers of a destiny no longer dictated by fate but by the painful illumination of truth. He realized the fight was no longer to validate his fears, but to rewrite the narrative itself. In the quiet storm of revelation, he dialed his mother's number, trembling hands betraying his steadiness. The line clicked past twice, then connected. Her voice, calmed but wary, answered. "We need to talk," Ethan said simply, his words breaking years of silence. "About everything." The conversation that followed was a floodgate, broken years of unspoken pain and denial pouring forth. Secrets long kept folded into shadows surfaced, heartbreaking and necessary. His mother's trembling voice acknowledged truths she had buried to protect, to forget. Ethan's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow but of release as he finally confronted the fractures that shaped his existence. The diary lay open between them, a testament to the price of hidden histories and the possibility of healing through brutal honesty. As the call ended, Ethan looked around the attic, its shadows no longer threatening but inviting him into a dialogue with the past. The camera held on his silhouette, caught between the fading light and encroaching night, a man reborn through revelation, poised on the cusp of transformation. Outside, the wind gathered strength, whispering through the trees, carrying with it a promise that the darkest secrets could be faced and that in facing them, the future might be his to write anew. The scene faded slowly into silence, the diary's final lines lingering like a whispered challenge. "What will you do with the story now?" The evening had settled into a brooding stillness, the old house folding into the thickening twilight like a secret reluctant to be unveiled. Ethan sat alone in the faded study, the air heavy with the weight of silence and the faint whiff of aged paper from the diary resting on his lap. The pages lay open but unread, as if the truths they held were too fierce to confront in the dim, cold room where shadows pooled like spilled ink. Outside, a storm brewed silently, clouds rolling in slow, ominous waves that swallowed the waning light, smothering the faint glow of street lamps and turning the suburban street into a corridor of shadows. The wind, once a gentle whisper, now clawed at the windows, rattling the old frames with sharp, relentless taps. The creaking floorboards beneath Ethan seemed to echo the unrest in his chest, each squeak a brutal reminder that the foundations upon which he had built his sense of self were crumbling. His hands clasped tightly around a coffee mug long since cooled trembled subtly. The rejection from the publication had been just the first gust. The revelations in the diary were a storm unrelenting and merciless. His grip on reality was fraying, the predictions and murmurs from those yellowed pages seeping into his every thought, blurring the line between his own desires and the ominous script laid out before him. A photograph hung crookedly on the wall, edges curling with age, depicting a family long since dispersed. Ethan's eyes traced the faded smiles, searching for the warmth he once believed was his birthright but now seemed as elusive as the receding daylight. The faces in the frame appeared to dissolve under the flickering candlelight, their smiles turning to hollow grins, mocking in their permanence. His breath came in shallow, uneven gasps as memories surged with a brutal intensity. Faces blurred into a montage of whispered lies and fractured trust, the secrets his family had buried for generations now clawing their way into the brittle light of his consciousness. Without warning, the candle sputtered, its flame dancing wildly before succumbing to the cold draft that crept beneath the door. Ethan reached out instinctively, cupping the embers as if to hold on to the last shreds of warmth and hope. The darkness clawed at the corners of the room, swallowing the edges of his vision until nothing was left but deep blue-black void. In the suffocating silence, a single word unfurled in his mind, barely a whisper yet profound in its weight: lost. Ethan's eyes closed, the room tilted, the quiet descending like a shroud. The diary slipped silently from his trembling hands, pages fluttering shut as if the very book mourned alongside him. His soul seemed to unravel with the night, threads of identity and purpose pulling loose in a tide of despair. The storm outside abruptly ceased, replaced by a deafening stillness that settled heavily like snow on fragile branches. The house creaked once more, a weary sigh in the vast emptiness. There, in the dim glow of dying embers, Ethan remained Dan Island adrift in a vast sea of shadows, suspended at the precipice of a descent deeper than the darkness surrounding him. The camera lingered on his hollowed silhouette, the fragile figure encased in silence and shadow, a haunting portrait of a man unraveling, the fragile line between past and future bleeding into oblivion. The house seemed to inhale a long, cold breath, its creaking floors moaning like sorrowful lament beneath Ethan's restless pace. The night pressed down heavily through the narrow windows, casting muted silver light that barely disturbed the dense shadows pooling in the corners. The air was sharp and biting, a chill that seeped deep into his bones, reflecting the gathering frost inside his fractured mind. Ethan sat slumped in the tattered armchair by the fireplace, its flickering flames offering little warmth, more a fragile dance of light swallowed quickly by shadow. His eyes, glassy and unfocused, stared blankly at the diary resting on his Nisa relic that had morphed from curiosity to torment. The thin leather cover was cracked and faded, but within it churned a relentless prophecy, eroding his grasp on reality and the fragile hope he once clung to. The silence in the room was suffocating, broken only by the intermittent creak of floorboards as the house murmured its ancient, uneasy song. Outside, the wind howled mournfully through the skeletal branches of the old oak tree standing sentinel against the dark sky. Its naked limbs scratched at the window panes like clawed fingers desperate to reach Ethan, to pull him deeper into the night. His breath came shallow and ragged, skin pale beneath the glow of the dying fire. The diary's pages fluttered weakly beside him, as if stirred by unseen hands, ghostly echoes of the past whispering accusations and half-truths. Faces faded into memory, warped and blurred like a half-remembered dream. His family, strangers now. His past, a shattering mosaic beyond repair. Ethan's fingers trembled as he reached for a tarnished pocket watch on the side table, its cracked glass reflecting the fractured state of his soul. The hands where frozen time halted in that moment of revelation and despair. He closed his eyes, the heavy stillness pressing against his temples. A faint, almost inaudible whisper seemed to emanate from the diary itself, curling through the darkened room. "It's over," it breathed, a cruel echo that hung like a noose tightening around his hope. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no sound came, only the rasp of a breath lost to the suffocating gloom. The room felt impossibly vast and yet claustrophobic, as though the walls themselves were closing in to crush the remnants of his spirit. In the corner, a fading photograph slipped from the mantelpiece, catching the meager light as it fell to the floor with a soft, scattering thud. Ethan's gaze lifted to the broken image, a smile frozen in sepia's last fragment of a life that no longer belonged to him. His body curled further, retreating into itself, the empty spaces around him mirroring the hollowness within. A single tear traced a slow, solitary path through the grime on his cheek, glinting like a fragile shard of light before vanishing into the unforgiving dark. As the flame trembled and finally guttered out, the room was swallowed by profound blackness. Ethan sat motionless, a silhouette of despair outlined against the void, the moment of utter collapse where all that once was hope dissolved into silence. The camera held its gaze on the stillness, the lingering echo of a man lost to the shadows, poised on the edge of oblivion, with nothing but the creaking house and fading memories as companions. And then, silence deep and absolute, wrapping the scene in a final embrace of darkness. The attic was thick with shadows, the only light coming from a small, trembling candle perched on the edge of an ancient wooden desk. Ethan sat hunched over the open diary, the dense silence pressing in like the walls themselves were closing on him. His eyes traced the elegant, fading script. The final pages revealed an old, brittle letter tucked within, its worn edges inviting him into a sliver of hope amid the wreckage. His hands trembled as he unfolded the fragile sheet, the faint scent of old paper mingling with the dusty attic air. The handwriting was unmistakable, yet unfamiliar in its tenderness, a voice from another life, a confession whispered across decades. To whoever finds this, the letter began, know that the story you inherit is not one of fatality but of choice. I carried secrets to protect the ones I loved, though those shadows grew heavier than I imagined. Forgive the silence, for in it lies a truth that may free you if you dare to listen. Ethan's breath caught, the weight of the words settling deep within him like the first fragile blossoms of spring after a brutal winter. The diary's relentless pull softened, not with finality, but with an unspoken invitation to question, to challenge, to reclaim agency over his fractured narrative. In the dim flicker of candlelight, his gaze drifted to the faded photographs scattered across the desk, their edges curled, faces once familiar now ghostly and distant. Yet within their silent presence, Ethan sensed a weaving together of past and future, memory and possibility. The never-ending creaks of the house seemed to pause, as if acknowledging this transient moment of fragile awakening. He sat back, the candle's flame reflecting in his eyes like a beacon, small but resolute. The shackles of doubt and despair coiled tightly around him began to slacken, touched by the subtle warmth of revelation. A glimmer of strength stirred beneath the surface, fragile yet real, a faint heartbeat of endurance. The attic's quiet whispered a challenge. To turn the page, to embrace the unknown not as a victim but as the author of what was still to come. Ethan closed the diary gently, the soft thud echoing in the vast silence. With slow, deliberate movements, he placed the letter on top, a talisman of new beginnings. Outside, the night wind shifted, carrying distant echoes of crickets and rustling leaves, an earthy chorus that breathed life into the stillness. The house creaked once more, but this time the sound was less like a groan and more like a whispered promise. Ethan's jaw set, eyes fixed on the narrow attic stairs leading downward, where the path to understanding and healing waited, uncertain but beckoning. The camera pulled back slowly, framing his solitary figure bathed in the soft glow of candlelight. A fleeting smile touched his lips, a delicate spark against the vast darkness, a fragile testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The scene faded into a lingering silence, rich with possibility, poised at the cusp of transformation. The shadowed attic gave way to a tentative dawn, faint sunlight filtering through the dust-streaked window. Ethan stood at the threshold, the heavy silence pressing like a tangible force against his chest. The diary lay open on the table, its pages illuminated faintly by the first gentle light of morning, and the air carried a hint of something new, fragile hope struggling to penetrate the gloom. He pinched the bridge of his nose, eyes fixed on the worn pages that held his destiny, his fears, his secrets, his unspoken truths. The words, once relentless in their predictions, now seemed to shimmer with a softer hue. As he traced the edges of the faded ink, a quiet realization dawned inside him. This diary was not his master, but a reflection, a mirror to confront and perhaps transform his own story. The old house creaked beneath the weight of centuries, yet in this fragile moment, it felt renewed, alive with the promise of unspoken possibilities. Ethan's gaze drifted over the relics that surrounded him, fragments of a family history long hidden, their silent stories whispering forgiveness and understanding. He reached out, hesitating only briefly before closing the diary gently, the touch almost reverent. The dark fog of doubt that had clouded his mind began to lift, replaced by a slow, cautious hope. Every uncertainty inside him, every sleepless night, every moment of despair, that internal war, felt like they were beginning to find their own silence. The morning light bathed the attic in a warm, golden glow, casting away the shadows of the night and igniting a flicker of strength within. Ethan's breath was deep and steady now, an unspoken vow to reframe his journey. The diary's predictions still lingered, but he was no longer a pawn. A small, real smile touched his lips in acknowledgement of the dawn's quiet promise. His hand lingered on the open pages, the words a gentle whisper against the silence. You are the author of your story. The sky beyond the attic window softened from gray to a muted, welcoming hue. The house's whispers turned into a song of renewal, a delicate symphony of hope and possibility. Ethan turned to face the rising light, shoulders straightening, eyes shining with tentative resolve. The shadows were not gone, but they no longer held sway over his heart. He was against the dawn, the first step toward a future he could shape. The scene lingered on this quiet, cinematic momenta, figure caught between darkness and light, fragile yet awakening, poised on the cusp of transformation, the journey just beginning. The attic was bathed in a muted, almost sacred light, the faint glow of dawn filtering through the fractured window. Ethan stood motionless, clutching the open diary like a fragile relic, a vessel for his newfound resolve. The predictions, once imprisoning, now flickered like shadows receding into the dawn of a new understanding. His eyes, steadier, searched the pages not for warnings but for clues, hints that he could reframe his story. A quiet wind wafted in through the cracks, whispering promises of change, of reclaimed agency. The house, with its creaking floors and time-worn walls, felt less like a mausoleum of secrets and more like a sanctuary of emergence. Ethan's gaze lingered on the faded photographs, the faces blurred but holding a sacred significance, symbols of stories yet to be rewritten. His breath slowed, a deliberate act of affirmation amid the fading shadows. The diary's tone had shifted from a foreboding oracle to a mirror, an invitation to confront, to challenge, to choose his own narrative. The predictions still lingered, but now they seemed distant echoes, almost insignificance drowned by the clarity flooding his mind. With a quiet resolve, he closed the diary gently, the delicate snap resonating in the hushed attic. His hands, once trembling with doubt, now felt steady, purposeful. The heavy, oppressive weight of fear was dissolving, replaced by the tentative light of conviction. The darkness that had threatened to consume him was lifting, momentarily displaced by the flickering dawn of agency. He turned toward the attic's doorway, each step deliberate. The house itself seemed to slow in reverence, the creaks and groans now sounds of acknowledgement, not condemnation. Ethan's silhouette, framed by the fractured light, embodied a fragile yet unwavering courage, a man stepping into a future he would shape. A gust of wind stirred the dust and loose papers, carrying with it a silent promise, change, rebirth, and the beginning of an uncharted journey. Ethan paused, staring into the horizon beyond the attic window, the first tentative glimpse of freedom from the shadows that had haunted his past. He lifted his gaze, eyes shining with a mixture of awe and determination, the weight of old predictions lifted from his shoulders. The camera, in a slow, rising shot, captured this moment, an emblem of resilience poised on the brink of transformation before fading into the quiet promise of a new day. The attic's gloom had lifted, replaced by a luminous clarity, golden light spilling through the gaps in the old wooden beams, illuminating a space once shrouded in shadows. Ethan stood at its center, an emblem of resilience, his posture straight and shoulders squared, as if the walls themselves acknowledged his awakening. The diary lay open before him, its predictions silent for the first time, each page a testament not to fate but to his grasp of agency. The air was thick with a quiet, palpable sense of victory, the emotional weight pressing against his chest easing into a gentle, steady breath. His eyes, once clouded with doubt, now shone with unshakable purpose, a resolve ignited by the realization that he could forge his own path regardless of the shadows that had haunted his past. He reached out slowly, fingers brushing the worn leather cover with reverence and newfound strength. The motif of the house, the creaking floors, the faded photograph shad once symbolized secrets and confinement. Now, they became symbols of his rebirth, the foundation on which he would rebuild his story. "No more shadows," Ethan whispered, voice smooth and confident, carrying across the space like a benediction. The house responded with a gentle sigh, the creaking floors now resonating with life, not fear, an echo of the journey he'd traveled and a promise of the journeys yet to come. He closed the diary with care, sealing the dark predictions of his past into memory, not destiny. The flickering candle beside it was a fragile flicker of hope, poised at the edge of dawn. The warmth spilled into his face, a mirror of the warmth blooming within a luminous embrace of self-awareness and choice. His gaze lifted outward, toward the world outside, the sun's first rays piercing the horizon, illuminating the ancient house like a beacon of resilience. Ethan took a step toward the window, shoulders lifted, heart steady, the weight of generations and fears lifted in one deliberate movement. The camera pulled back slowly, framing this moment an emblem of transformation, hope standing firm amid ruins once thought unbreakable. The dawn's promise stretched infinitely before him, a symbol of freedom, of stories yet unwritten, of a future reclaimed from shadows. In that cinematic pause, Ethan stood rooted in the light of his own awakening, an affirmation that even the deepest darkness could yield to the power of understanding and choice. The house, once a vessel of secrets, now a sanctuary of hope, whispered subtly in the wind's gentle song, a silent testament to the dawn of a new beginning. The late afternoon sun spilled a soft, golden glow across Ethan's modest living room, a gentle light that seemed to wash away the shadows of doubt and fear that had once relentlessly clawed at his spirit. His gaze lingered on the framed photograph of his grandfather's house, now a calming centerpiece of his quiet world. The room was peaceful, the clutter of old books and photographs seeming to breathe a quiet wisdom, a testament to a journey completed. Ethan sat quietly, the house wrapped in a serene silence broken only by the soft rustling of leaves outside. The air was rich with a subtle warmth, a stark contrast to the darkness he had waded through in absence of chaos, a whisper of reconciliation. He traced his fingers over the surface of a small, worn stone on the mantel, an artifact of his family's history, a symbol of foundations laid long before him. His eyes tracked the faint reflections in the glass, a mirror to the quiet clarity now settling within. The diary, once a harbinger of dread, had been returned to its place beneath the floorboards, sealed as a chapter of the past. Now, the space around him radiated calm, an unspoken acknowledgement that the storm had passed and a new horizon awaited. He took a slow breath, feeling the depth of the momenta, recognition that the tumultuous nights and fractured memories were mere shadows now receding in the dawn of understanding. The house seemed to breathe with him, its creaking floors and whispering walls celebrating a silent victory, the triumph of truth over fear. Lifting his gaze, Ethan allowed a gentle, genuine smile to blossom, a smile forged through pain, patience, and newfound acceptance. Words felt unnecessary. The quiet pulse of the room conveyed 1,000 unspoken stories of healing and hope. Behind him, The window framed a sky brushed in soft hues of amber and violet, a visual poem of transition ending one chapter, opening to another. The moment lingered, a fragile beauty captured in the stillness of time, as Ethan rested into the serenity that had once seemed impossible. The camera slowly pulled back, capturing him as a symbol of resilience standing, finally, in the light of his own making. The house, the garden, even the distant horizontal whispered a promise of peace, the promise of a future unwritten but inviting. In that cinematic pause, Ethan embodied a quiet Couragean understanding that the past, no matter how shadowed, was merely the beginning of a story he now chose to write anew. The scene faded into a canvas of gentle light, a visual testament to the healing power of acceptance and the infinite potential of a soul at peace. The warm glow of evening light seeped softly through the large window, casting a gentle amber hue across Ethan's now tranquil living room. In the corner, the old floorboards lay untouched, silent witnesses to a chapter closed. Ethan sat in his favorite chair, a quiet serenity washing over him as he looked at the space once shadowed by doubts, fears, and the oppressive weight of the diary's predictions. Now, everything had shifted. He reached out, fingers resting over the faded edges of a photograph, a candid shot taken in happier days. The faces smiled back, unburdened by secrets and fears, unshadowed by predictions. The past had been a tumultuous storm, but it was no longer churning in his mind. Instead, it stood behind him, peaceful, an anchor and a lesson. His breath was slow and deliberate, each inhale and exhale a cleansing stream washing away the remnants of guilt and misconception. The journal, once his tormentor, was returned beneath the floorboards, its place now a symbol of acceptance and acknowledgement that the stories written in ink did not define him. Outside, the trees in the yard swayed gently in the wind, their branches whispering ancient lullabies, reminders that life cycles through darkness and light, chaos and calm. Ethan's gaze drifted to the horizon, where the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with visionary strokes of pink and lavender, an indelible imprint of renewal. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the quiet strength that had grown within across these tumultuous weeks. The house was no longer haunted but inhabited by a peace that felt grounding and profound. The shadows had been confronted, the secrets unearthed not to ensnare him, but to free him. A small smile spread across his face, tender and genuine, as he whispered softly, "This is not the end. It's the beginning." The words lingered like a promisee vow to himself that his story was his own to write, to shape, to forgive. In this delicate, cinematic silence, Ethan rose slowly from his chair, the scene revealing a man transformed, calm, steady, and ready to embrace whatever tomorrow would bring. The camera slowly withdrew, capturing the peaceful universe he had reclaimed, a testament that understanding and acceptance were the true keys to liberation. The evening stretched into a gentle twilight, casting a soft, amber glow across Ethan's quiet home. In the sanctuary of his living room, the flickering shadows of late sunset caressed the walls where old photographs now hung with a calm purpose. The house, once haunted by secrets and fears, drifted into a peaceful silence, its creakings now whispers of resilience. Ethan moved slowly through the space, a figure transformed by the weight of his journey. He paused before the worn floorboards, now closed but no longer a trap, merely vessels holding the shadows of a past he had faced and understood. His eyes lingered on the place where the old diary once lay hidden, its secrets now released. He reached down, fingers gentle but steady, and placed the diary back beneath the floor, its dusty cover a quiet testament to years of concealment. The act was reverent, a symbol of acceptance, a gesture that sealed the chapter of fear and predestination. Behind him, the house responded a soft sigh, like a breath released after holding tight for too long. Outside, the world breathed in the calm of dusk, the trees whispered their ancient songs, leaves shimmering in the gentle breeze. The sky faded from gold to violet, an eternal canvas of fleeting beauty, a reflection of the fleeting yet infinite nature of recovery and peace. Ethan's face softened, eyes closing for a moment as if to savor the profound silence, a silence filled with understanding that he was the master of his own story, no longer dictated by shadows or predictions. His shoulders relaxed, and a faint, authentic smile touched his lips. The weight of uncertainty lifted, replaced by the light of inner peace. In that cinematic pause where shadows dissolved into the calm of the night, the house stood silent and resolute. Ethan's gaze lingered on the horizon, a visual metaphor for the open, unwritten future awaiting him, a future forged by the courage to confront, forgive, and finally, to let go. Would you trust a diary that knew your future? Discuss your thoughts below.